Assalamualaikum. For those of you who do not know, Assalamualaikum means peace be upon you. Thank you for coming to our event. The schedule for this evening will be starting off with our talk by Imam Islam, and that will last until 7:45. And then at that time, we'll be having our sunset prayers, and we definitely encourage y'all to come out and observe us praying as a demonstration. And then after that, we will be holding a brief Q&A. Now, to give you a little background information, Islam Assad was raised in Austin, and he has a bachelor's in chemical engineering from TU. After working for a few years in Austin and Dallas.
From UT.
Oh.
And we are the university.
That was a typo. I was wondering what that university was, but after working for a few years in Austin and Dallas, he returned to school for a graduate degree. But longing to devote his life to his faith led him to drop out in pursuit of Islamic education. Massad's first job as an imam was at the Islamic Center of Little Rock in Arkansas, where he stayed for 3 years building bridges with the former Nation of Islam congregation and taking on community problems such as poverty and crime. Massad returned to Austin in 2006, where he got the opportunity to become the local mosque religious leader. He has encouraged the reaching out to non-Muslims through charitable works and interfaith events. Imam Islam is known for his ability to capture the hearts and minds of his audience and especially connect with the youth. Please welcome Imam Islam.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. As hard as it is for me to say it, howdy. Howdy. Gigum. Well, actually, hookum. I'm very honored to be with you. Start first with the praise for the one God, Lord and Sustainer of the universe, the one who created all of us, whether we believe in Him or not, the one who sustains us, and the one who sends to us light and guidance. And the peace and blessings be upon His prophets and messengers, from the first, which is a great honor for all human beings, that the father of all human beings, Adam, peace upon him, is the prophet of God, prophet of Allah, until the last Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. So once again, thank you to the Texas A&M MSA and to the student body that is present here on a Thursday night. I don't know why whenever I get invited here, there's some other kind of sports events, things going on, where I would rather maybe secretly be watching March Madness instead of being here. No, I'll have some time afterwards. We're playing a late game tonight. So the topic of this evening, connecting with the Creator. And so to talk about a connection, what shows up right away is who is being connected, and then what is that connection between them. And so we'll look at who is Allah. This is the Arabic word for the one God, who we believe is the creator of all living things, all inanimate objects, all universes, all that exists. And then look also at the human being, that we are human beings. Anybody not a human being in here? Oh, someone's about to raise their hand. Oh, wow. Okay. But maybe there's some angels. I don't know. But you just can't come out and say, I'm an angel. You know, you can't, give your cover away. So, I don't know, any jinns? All right. So we'll look at the human being as well, and look at that relationship and that connection, especially from the Islamic perspective. Also, right before the prayer, just to give you a chance to prepare for what you will see and hear, we'll talk about some of the essence and some of the meaning behind the various postures and some of the words that Muslims do and Muslims say in their 5 daily prayers. So to start with, communication. Let's play some ping pong here. Let's see, did I beat China yet? Okay, let's see here. Play some ping pong. Oh, man. Okay. Oh, all right. I'm supposed to be talking to y'all. So what happened there? Maybe some of y'all were like, what's going on? Maybe some of you were annoyed. You already came late. those Longhorns think they can come late and just get away with it. Like he's supposed to be talking to us and he's playing ping pong. So this is the first aspect of the communication, or the connection between the creation and the creator. Is the reality is we are being distracted, and we are distracting ourselves from that ongoing connection. And sometimes literally games on our telephones, but also, or smartphones, not telephones anymore, but also through our own base desires can be pulling us away from the call that is coming to us, and we're not hearing it. Our own worries and anxieties, our own pride, our own arrogance, our own sins can all be obstacles in realizing that there is a connection between us and the Creator. And in the Holy Quran, one of the worst sorts of punishment that are mentioned on the Day of Judgment is when there is a barrier that is put between a person's Lord and themselves. That there's a seal that is put that comes from a barrier that actually began in one's own heart, that is reflected in the next slide. So I wanted to put that out there at first, that the Islamic methodology to strengthening that connection, or if you will, to get 5 bars or 6 bars instead of 1 bar or no bars, right? Goes through a process of refinement of oneself and purification of oneself. And so right before the prayer, for example, or many of the Muslims probably before they came to the event, because they knew that they would be in a situation where they need to be ready for prayer, we make an ablution. We call it wudu. Can y'all say wudu? Did you say voodoo? I didn't say voodoo. I said wudu. All right, wudu. No, it's not voodoo. We don't practice voodoo. So wudu. Okay, wudu. Does anybody know what it means? Give me a chance to get a drink too. Does anybody know what wudu means? You can, even if you're a Muslim, you can take a stab at it. Wow. Okay. Well, based on what I was just talking about with water. Okay, ablution. Anything else? Bismillah. Wudu. How about the word dope? Not what Homer Simpson says, dope. But dope in Arabic. Light, right? So the connection, wudu and dope. The idea is by washing and cleansing, you're washing away your sins to establish a connection, and the energy of connection, that is also the faith connection, is of light. And so it's no accident that in the chapter called Light, in the 35th verse of the Quran, it says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. It said that Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth, and then begins to talk about the parable of His light. And so when we talk about knowing Allah, to establish that connection, it is to know the artist through his artistry. And this is, a person is saying, well, God is so great, so transcendent, something that I can't grasp. But actually, by looking at His creation around us, and looking at our own creation, then a person can begin to appreciate His awesomeness, His sublime reality. And even though we cannot approach His essence, we can definitely begin to experience greater and greater depth of the reality of who He is within our own hearts. And so this comes not only through the creation around us, but also through His revelation. So the books that He's given to the prophets and messengers. So one of the key things you will hear in the prayer, in the sunset prayer, which you will see shortly, which is, in my opinion, more worthwhile than me speaking and you listening, is just to see the Muslims pray, hear the Muslims pray. The central thing you will hear will be the recitation of the Quran, which we don't say as just a holy book, but that these are actually the divine words of God Himself, communicating. And that as we are communicating it back to Him, He is communicating with us. So for example, every Muslim will recite the first chapter of the Holy Quran called Al-Fatiha, the opening. So when a person praises God in that chapter, then God says, oh, my servant is praising me. And when he gives honor to God, he says, oh, my servant is honoring me. Then when he gets to you alone I worship and you alone I ask for help, guide me to the straight path, then Allah speaks back and he says, my servant is asking me, and for him I will give him whatever he asks. And so there is this communication between the individual created being with his creator, but at the same time those other created beings who are worshiping the same creator are also connected, which is a whole other dimension as well of being connected to others who are connected to the one who is the most sublime, who is the light of the heavens and the earth. And in fact, for the loci of light throughout this world, the places of worship and of glorification of the oneness of God and His greatness, all of those are places of light. And they all are interconnected. So even as we speak here, by just speaking about God, that angels of light come to this dimension and they seek to listen and they seek to gain fulfillment. So this is also something to keep in mind. Also, there is an Islamic argument, and it's not exclusive to the religion of Islam, it's probably in many other faith traditions, that deep down the human being already has a sense of his creator and his maker. And so the Muslim theologians, they went through a hypothetical exercise of, if you were to take a person just out of the blue and just put them on an island with no connection to any culture, any civilization, and what would it be like? And so they were all come to the conclusion that for sure he would eventually develop to a point that he knows that he has a creator who created him and that he needs to turn to him. And this is very much the Abrahamic tradition as well. We have in the Quran, in the chapter called The Poets, where it talks about Abraham, peace upon him, addressing his father and addressing his people as well, and their worship of many different idols. Some of them representing aspects of nature, the sun, the moon, fire, but some of them the own concoction of their minds and their internal mythology. So what Abraham, peace upon him, he said, إِنَّهُمْ عَدُوٌّ لِي إِلَّا رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ الَّذِي خَلَقَنِي فَهُوَ يَهْدِينَ وَالَّذِي يطعمني ويسقين وإذا مرضت فهو يشفين. And then he said, والذي يميتني ثم يحيين. He said, يميتني ثم يحيين. والذي أطمع أن يغفر لي خطيئتي يوم الدين. And then he said, ربي هب لي حكما وألحقني بالصالحين. All of you, of course, are fluent in Arabic, so I don't have to. Yeah? No? You'll have like an Arabic program at A&M and yes? It's okay, yeah, that's good. So do you know what I said? No. All right, we'll get to that. Okay. So Abraham, peace be upon him. And it's good, by the way, that you're learning another language, because then you can get a deeper appreciation, not just for words, but for a spirit of a people as well. So in any case, Abraham, peace be upon him, in Arabic we say Ibrahim, he said all of these deities and idols, he said they're all enemies to me, except for the one who has created me. He could have said except for, and named a name, except for Allah. But he wanted to emphasize, whoever has created me, that is the only one who has an absolute right over me. So he said, all of them I have nothing to do with, except for the one who has created me, he will guide me. So he had this understanding, not only that he has the obligation to worship his creator, and in fact in Islam we say the creator then, even though he doesn't have to put any obligation on himself, he put an obligation upon himself that if his creation worships only him, that he would not put his creation in the hellfire. But in any case, he understood that since he created me, he will guide me. So this is what Abraham, peace upon him, as a young man was thinking, and in a deep way. And then he said, the one who gives me food to eat and drink, and the one who, when I am sick, he is the one who will cure me, and the one that who will cause me to die and then bring me back to life again, and the one that I ask him to forgive my sin. And then it continues from there. So this takes us to the human being himself. And the aspect that is within us, that is responsible before God, is what we call the nafs, or the self. The self. So we are physical as well as spiritual beings. We're not just physical, we're not purely materialistic or material beings, nor are we purely spiritual beings, but we are an interesting mixture of both together. And you will see that in Islam, both dimensions of the human being are being addressed. So for example, when we talked about the wudu, or the ablution, a Muslim is washing their hand 3 times, right? And so when I talk about these kind of things in Islam, I was talking about this to some physicians in a hospital in Little Rock, and they were saying that's just so revolutionary. So they were thinking at the material, physical level, that 14 centuries ago, your prophet was teaching people to do frequent hand washing. So they were thinking about in terms of disease, the best way to eliminate or to prevent the spread of communicable diseases is frequent hand washing. So that's at the physical level. But in the spiritual plane, the Prophet Muhammad said that as you are washing, and you rinse your mouth, you wash your whole face, and it's actually very rejuvenating, very reviving, and your arms, he said you're washing your sins away, right? And so you are, again, bringing this light, because even though we are not pure, we seek to become purer and purer, and stand in front of He who is all pure, and who is all light. So in any case, this dimension of the self, in the Quran, you will see it broken into 3 types of self. Some people try to compare this to Freud's id, ego, and superego, but I personally have not studied it closely enough to say that they're exactly symmetrical, but it's interesting that the Quranic expression is of 3 levels of self, and Freud also comes up later on with 3 levels of self. But the 3 levels that are mentioned in the Quran, the most primal level, in everyday language we call it the reptilian brain sometimes, but in the Quran it's called the nafs al-ammara bisu, which is the self, the part of ourself that prompts one to evil, right? It's good to see you again, brother. So let's say the brother punches me, right? Then my self that prompts me to evil is not just to punch him back once, don't worry, but to pummel him, right? Because my evil side of myself is like, you're going to let him do that to you, right? You got to show him, right? Obviously, justice would be, in the Quran is mentioned, same way like in the Torah, that if he punched me once, I punch him back once, but in the Quran it says it's better to forgive. And whoever forgives, then his reward is with his Lord. So the self that prompts one to evil, to this sort of vengeance, prompts one to evil, to follow the base and covetous desires, even at the expense of one's principles or at the expense of another human being. All of that comes from a lower part of ourself. And the jihad, the struggle, is to overcome that consistently and to not eradicate the lower self, but to discipline it, right? And then the next level of self, what we call in English, it would be closely called the conscience. So after I do something really terrible, if I'm a normal human being and not a pathological type of person, I will have a sense of guilt, right? So many of you read Crime and Punishment. So the whole point of that book was he got away with the perfect crime, he murdered, and nobody even knew it was him, but it just kept on gnawing on him that he had to go and just confess that he was the one who did it. And so this is what we call a nafs al-lawwama, which is the self that constantly blames. But then the highest level of self, which we seek to do through continuous prayer and remembrance and reading Quran and being patient through life and so on, and developing connections to God and to the people of God, the highest level of self we call an-nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the self that is at peace and is in a tranquil state, right? So it's kind of sort of just like relax and just have a nice smile on it, right? And this is, of course, the level of the prophets, level of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that he was always in that zone, right? And so when one of the Bedouins came and he pulled the Prophet Muhammad from behind very harshly, and it left a mark on his neck. And he said, give me from the money that Allah gave to you. It's not your money, and it's not your father's money. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, he could have turned around and yelled back. He could have told his companions with just the lift of a finger to beat this man or deal with this man. But he turned around, and he turned around smiling. He didn't have any anger at all. He turned around smiling, and he said, "Come with me." He took him to his quarters, which has very little, very meager. He said, "Whatever you see, you can take." And he kept on giving him until that person was pleased. And so to be able to do that, it's not a technique that you acquire. It's not some kind of self-help books that you'll read. And it's something, again, for us who are not prophets and messengers, that would come only after a long path and journey of discipline and also remembrance and connection to the one God. So in terms of the relationship, we talked about Allah, we talked about the human being. In terms of the relationship, it's connected to this destiny as well as purpose. So destiny and purpose. The Quran is very clear. There is the mystery of the life that is within us, specifically the ruh or the spirit that is within us. And this spirit is something that is a connection to the divine. And that is how we're able to appreciate the divine. We're not saying that the human being himself has God inside of him. We're not saying that the human being is divine, but he has an aspect of him that is what enables and what gives the sensitivity to the divine. And so that ruh is a mystery. In terms of the life itself, it's not a mystery in terms of the purpose of life. So the purpose of life in the Quran stated that Allah says in the Holy Quran, God says in the Holy Quran that I did not create the humans and the jinn except for one purpose, which is to worship me. To worship me. That's the whole purpose. Right away in our minds we say, well, why? God doesn't need anything. Why does he want us to worship him? So there must be something else going on there. And so one of the commentators of the Quran, he said, so that they will know me. And so by knowing who Allah is, your natural disposition would then be to love him. And the more you know him, the more you love him. And the more you love him, the more you worship him. So as children, as Muslims, we start out, our parents teach us at the age of 7 how to pray. You got to do your prayer, you got to make sure you're doing your prayer. But if you keep on going deeper and you know what you're doing and you develop a relationship with your Creator, it'll get to the point where after one prayer is done, you can't wait till the next prayer comes. And it becomes your source of refuge, your solace, your inspiration, your rejuvenative drink. It becomes everything for you, just that moment that you will see, God willing, shortly, where you just stop everything and you don't look right and left and you don't play ping pong against the different countries, and you're just focused on you and your Lord. And then you begin to manifest that sense of devotion and reverence by bowing, by prostrating. This humility that is not displayed to any other of the creation, not even to our parents, not even to the prophets or messengers, to put our whole essence, which is the face, is the self, to put it on the ground. Even if we are, and I don't think anybody here are kings or princes, right? Or LeBron James, I guess he thinks he's a king, right? But if he was a Muslim, he would also put his face on the ground, right? So no matter who you are or what you think you are, it's that moment to be at ease because you're not trying to be something other than what you are, which is we are weak human beings who are in need and impoverished to the one who is the Most High. And so the prayer brings all of that together in word, in action, and also when it is felt deeply, which is actually a pillar of the prayer, is the tranquility and the sense of being disconnected from all of the creation. Right? I was telling the brother this, we have it in our mosque. We have a poster because sometimes the cell phones go off in the middle of the prayer, and it's really irritating, especially with the weird ringtones nowadays, right? You're like in the middle of prayer trying to get really deep, and then all of a sudden someone's ringing, ah! Like, what kind of ringtone is that, right? It's like someone's screaming, right? Or some song, Bollywood song comes on. Come on, brother, what's going on? So we have a sign that says, has a cell phone and it has a line going through it. It says, disconnect from the rest of creation and connect with the Creator. And the word Salat itself, right? We say prayer just to be, brief, but the word Salah has to do with connection and connecting. So some of the further relations or further connections that I will touch upon before going into a description of the salah is what we started with at the beginning. It says that Allah and His angels, they are doing salah on you. So when we do salah, from human being to God, salah is to worship, to love, to adore. So what is salah from the perspective of God towards us? So when it says He does salah on you, it would be a mistranslation to say He prays on you. So the salah from Allah is He sends to you light and guidance. He wants you to succeed. He wants to see you repenting and turning to Him. And in fact, His joy, it cannot be described when His slave or His servant, the one that He has created with His own hands, that he turns back to His Lord. He's more overjoyed than a Bedouin who lost everything in the desert and then once again found all of it and has his new life. So God's joy is more than that person's joy. So we talked about in this connection, Allah, which is the Arabic way of saying the one God. Some say it's a contraction of Al-Ilah. And we talked about the human being. We talked about that connection of love, of reverence, of deep devotion, but also from the other direction of guidance and light and also love. Because it's a mutual love that is there. The highest category that is mentioned in the Quran, their description is that yuhibbuhum wa yuhibbuna. It says that He loves them and they love Him. Right? And so this is this connection there. No doubt we also have the aspect of fear as well, which is a person loves his Lord so much that he fears to displease Him. Right? We also have in our teachings, no doubt, the same way that we have this hope in God's mercy, we have a fear of His punishment. But the hope in His mercy is to exceed and surpass the fear of His punishment, because He is the one who has stated that His mercy overrides His wrath. In any case, a transition, you guys have been really patient, appreciate that. After the prayer you'll have, and I look forward to that, I think it's usually the best part of these kind of things, would be the question and answer session. So I look forward to that right after the prayer. But I wanted to give you a little bit of what's going on with the prayer. So when the Muslim, he makes his ablution, there will be a call to prayer. So I'm sure the brothers have that set up. The person calling to the prayer, he's basically making an invitation to the rest of the creation around him. Whether human, jinn, angel, whatever the creation is, he's calling all of the creation, come and connect with the Creator. This is what the adhan is. It says, come to the salah. And then he says, come to the success. So we said the purpose of our creation is to worship Allah, to know, to love, to worship. So, and we know the definition. It's really good to see a lot of military guys. What's the definition of a successful mission? You set the mission and then what happened?
Complete the objectives.
Yeah, you're in the military too? You like a military. So you achieved your mission, right? That's success. They say, okay, I got to take this hill. I took that hill. That's success. Right? So in the Quran, I know it's not that simple, but in the Quran it says your point in life is to worship Allah. So by coming and worshiping right after the sunset, then you have achieved your objective, which is to worship God in that specific way, in that specific time. There are also less formal ways of worship, by the way, but this is the most formal way of worship. And so then you are successful. Whether you have a big bank account or a small bank account, whether you're from a rich family or whether you're from a dominant class or in society or not, if you have at that moment in time stopped everything and worshiped your Lord, then you are successful. So that's the call to prayer. Now when we start the prayer and throughout, the transitional phrase is Allahu Akbar, which is God is greater. Right? And it's very sad that the way that it's been portrayed in the Western media is that if someone says Allahu Akbar, you got to get ready to like duck or something, right? But actually it is a powerful statement, there's no doubt. Because it's that person saying, I'm not afraid of anything, I'm not intimidated by anything, God is the greater one. But in the context, the greater context, what we're talking about here is saying God is greater than me, God is greater than my worries, God is greater than my aspiration, God is greater than my job, God is greater than my class, God is greater. And so that's why I'm stopping everything and I raise my hand It's a surrender, because Islam is a surrender. And putting everything behind me, I say, Allahu Akbar. God is great. Right? And then we put, in a very peaceful way, right hand over left hand. If a person has a posture of right hand over left hand, they're telling you they're not going to fight with you. They're not going to mess with you. They're just trying to be very much within their own element. And you look down, and the person begins to recite from his Lord's book, the Quran. And if he's really or she's really into it, the tears will begin to come down from his or her eyes, which is a sign of the heat of the connection, the tears coming out, right? Because the heart had opened up and now the tears are flowing. And that's the salah is going, and a person is just in their own element, and then they say Allahu Akbar and they bow. So even if they don't know the Arabic that they're reciting, I went to a prison, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which way to say it, but there are a lot of Muslims in prison, people who go into prison, they convert to Islam. So one of the brothers, he said, I don't even know what I'm saying. So I said, just think about the postures that you're doing. So when you're bowing, in all languages, it's very clear you're communicating this deep respect and reverence. And you're supposed to be doing it all in a very calm, disciplined, tranquil way. And then you come back up and you say some words of praise. Now, the high point of the prayer, paradoxically, is when you are at the lowest point. So when we actually make the prostration and put our face on the ground, on the earth from which we have been created, then the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, said it's at that point that the person is closest to his Lord. When we understand that He is the Most High, right? And that we completely surrender to Him. And again, it's the manifestation of the word Islam, which is this complete surrender of self. Not to any other human being, not to any other ideology, not to any other person, even to any other government, it's the same to the one who has created me. That is the one that I absolutely surrender to. Other types of affiliations and loyalties are relative, and they're always checked against that one. So the principle that Muslims will live by, yes, they will follow the laws, yes, they will be good, yes. But if it comes to disobedience of their Creator, then they'll always sacrifice obedience to the creation if it means that obeying that Creator that creation will be disobedient. So for example, again, let's say, and I hope this never happens, but it's happening to a lot of Muslims in the Muslim world today because of the things that are going on. Let's say that you're in the military, let's say you're in the Syrian military, and the commanding officer says, shoot these protesters, right? And so in Islam, we're taught you have to listen and obey. And so now your commanding officer is saying to shoot these protesters, but then the person says, wait a minute, I put my face on the ground as a sign of absolute obedience to my Lord and Creator. And He said not to fight against those who are not fighting against you, and definitely not to take their life in this cold-blooded, murderous way. So at that point, the person who's been going through that with meaning, he will say no, even if it means his own life will be taken, which actually has happened. May Allah accept him in His highest paradise. So in any case, it's a very intense part of the prayer. At the end, as we are about to break for the prayer itself, there's a sitting, and so there's this calmness. That, again, right before coming into the crazy world and the chaos of the world, it's really one of the scenes, it's unfortunate what's going on in Egypt now, but one of the scenes I remember during the revolution, the time for prayer would come and the people would stop everything, and they would pray like in the middle of the street, and like they'd be shooting tear gas at them, they would still be praying. And then right after the Imam says, Salam alaikum, someone pick up tear gas. Right? So it's like everything just stops. Even between Muslims, we have our own issues where we don't get along on certain things, we have differences. But once the prayer starts, everybody just lines up, and you can't choose, I'm going to stand by him, I'm not going to stand by him. Everything just stops, and everybody it's just really amazing. Just at the drop of a hat, especially when you see it in Mecca, everybody just lines up. They never have met each other before. They don't even speak the same language. And then all of a sudden, they're all in unison after the leader who is also worshiping the same Lord, all together in unison. The exit for the prayer that I conclude with is we say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, to the right. And so by being in this peaceful moment with God, then we embrace the rest of the world, and we extend from that peace that came from within us to the rest of the world, and we say, peace and the mercy of Allah to you And then to the left, peace and the mercy of Allah to you. And so if a person is doing this in this deep kind of way 5 times a day, this is how that connection will continue to be stronger and stronger and stronger and deeper to the point where a person can almost not even stand not being able to meet his Lord. Thank you all for your time and for coming out. Tonight we look forward to further engagement after the prayers. I think the brothers, the call to prayer, if they wanted to hear it, is someone going to call the prayer? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Just some small things.
Okay.
I don't speak Arabic, so I was just wondering about spelling.
Spelling.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So,
Wudu. So phonetically, I would spell it as W-U-D-O-O. In Arabic, it would be well, ba, well, and then hamza. But in English, W-U-D-O-O.
and then do.
Oh, do. So do would be in English. That would be hard. It's probably closer to like do for the Homer Simpson. So do maybe D-U-A, but not pronouncing the A.
D-O-U also.
D-O-U.
Yeah, D-O-U.
Okay,
yeah.
do.
Do.
Okay, there you go.
D-O-U-A.
D-O-U-A.
it's one.
Okay.
And then
So
last
do means like light and radiance. Yeah.
and Salat.
Salat. Okay, so salat would be S-A-L-A-H. So like salad, but instead of a D at the end, you put an H. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How do you spell the first 2 in Arabic?
The first 2 that he asked.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Arabic, so waw, and then dad, and then waw, and then hamza, and then do would be spelled dad, waw, and then hamza. Yeah. So I think the gentleman here raised his hand first, and then I'll come back to you. Yes, you. Yeah.
Okay, I had a question about so those, I guess theologians that experiment on like, every person has like that inner, I guess, aspect that kind of recognizes God. But I was just wondering how they went about like conducting an experiment.
It was all like hypothetically
Okay.
speaking, just from their knowledge of sociology and human behavior, and because the Islamic scholars of the past, they were not just well versed in the Quran and the Hadith, which are the revelational scriptures, but they also were some of the best in the fields of sociology, of medicine, and these kind of things. So some of the names, for example, in social, like Ibn Khaldun, and then medicine, like Ibn Sina. And so they brought all of this vast knowledge along with their religious knowledge, and then they said, if this were to happen, then this would be the case. In terms of the reality, other than the Soviet Union, there's never been a human civilization that was atheistic. We can talk about monotheistic or polytheistic or worship of nature or spirits, but there's never been a human civilization that's been atheistic. And so, again, from a secular atheistic perspective, they say, oh, that's some part of the human brain, the God part of the brain. But from the faith perspective, it's something that Allah put in us, deep down in us, to know Him and to recognize Him. And in fact, it's almost like an echo of our first meeting of souls with God, that He actually talked to all the souls. And He said, am I not your Lord? And they said, yes. And so the idea, a big part of Islam is about just remembering. So that we, and our name is insan, which means the one who forgets. And so it's like we're forgetting, and if we just go through remembrance, then it will all come back to us. And so literally Muslims, you will see them just glorifying God one after the other, one after the other. Sometimes you see what looks like the rosary type beads. And so they may be just saying one of God's names over and over, over and over. And then they get to a point of this deep feeling within them. Sometimes even states of ecstasy and so on, just by remembering, who their Lord is. Yes, sir.
Yes, hearing about the way you spoke about Muslims relating to Allah, the one God, as far as humility and connecting, and Allah putting that desire to know Him deep inside the human soul, and Him being alive, all these things, they sound really similar to the way I've heard Christians speak of their their God, the one God.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what the differences were between the two. in your opinion.
All right. So the reason we believe that they're similar is we believe that the same God of Jesus, same God of Moses, same God of Abraham, is also the same God of Muhammad, and he's in fact the God of all human beings. He's not a ethnic or provincial or tribal God. In the Quran, Allah is never described as Lord of the Arabs. He's always Lord of the world. So this is one. So especially when it comes to Scripture. So when you see commonalities between the Torah, the New Testament, the Quran, a person might say, oh, so they were just copying from each other. But from our perspective, it's not they're copying from each other. It's the same God is communicating the same message in different instantations of time. In terms of the differences, and also there's a big commonality because they're all Semitic in origin, Semitic traditions, right? So even the language is actually very much in common. Whenever I'm in interfaith dialogues and there's a rabbi and he says something in Hebrew, I say, what did you say? Oh, I say that. Oh, potato. Musa, Moshe. Okay. That's cool. Salam, shalom. And then we start fighting after that. So in terms of the differences between Islam and Christianity, they revolve around the nature of Jesus, peace upon him, the nature of handling sin, and then obviously about the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. So Muslims would say that Jesus, peace upon him, is a word from Allah, a spirit from him, that Allah acted through him, but they never say that Jesus is Allah. They never say Jesus is God or son of Allah, but rather that he was a very special creation created by Allah. Whereas the mainstream Christianity say that he is 100% man and also 100% God at the same time, also son of God. And then about sin, that the mainstream Christian would say that there were sacrifices in the past, and there has to be a sacrifice for the redemption of all human beings' sins, and that would be the final lamb, which is Jesus, peace upon him. So as Muslims, to be honest, we see that as anathema on many different levels. But we say, to deal with sin is we turn to Allah and ask him for forgiveness. And he knows our sincerity. And if he sees that we're sincere, he is the most forgiving and he is the most merciful. Further action is required if it has to do with another human being. So for example, if I stole your pen and then I went to the next prayer and I said, oh Allah, forgive me for stealing, what's your name? Chad, for stealing. Chad, did you get a lot of jokes about Florida because of your name? With the Chads hanging Chad? Oh, okay.
Not in a while. But.
No, okay, sorry. I'm an old man, I guess. So they said, oh Allah, forgive me for stealing Chad's pen. And I still have it in my pocket, right? No, for the repentance to be complete, I have to go back to you and give you your pin back and say, I'm sorry. Or you can forgive me and say, fine, man, keep the pin. It's just a Walmart 10 cents, right? If you forgave me, then now that's between me and Allah's forgiven. So then the third one about the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, we see him as the last messenger of God, also a descendant of Abraham, but from the line of Ishmael. Whereas the Christians, if they are a very confrontational type Christian, they'll say he is the devil, or they say he is a false prophet. Who is the author who puts him in I really had a hard time with that book in AP English. He puts the Prophet Muhammad in hellfire. What's his name? Dante's Inferno, right? A more kind of ecumenical Christian will say, he's a great teacher, he's a wise person, that kind of thing. So that would be also a major difference, is who do we say the Prophet Muhammad is? We say he's the Prophet and Messenger of God. I say that most Christians wouldn't say that. At the same time, an experience that I had, I was explaining this to a person I was buying pizza from, and she was like, we don't even know who Muhammad is to believe in him or not believe in him, right? So she kind of got me there. It's like, how can I disbelieve in someone I don't even know who he is, right?
Yeah. So you said peace be upon him. Peace be upon him. That means that you say that when someone has passed away, right?
Peace be upon him, we say for any prophet or messenger of God.
Okay. As
out of respect. So they're human beings, but they're the best of human beings, so we show an extra level of reverence.
Okay.
All right, cool. So it says, during the demonstrated prayer, why did the female Muslims pray behind the men? Why were some women not praying? So no, that's a fair and a good observation. So during the demonstrated prayer, some people think by women praying behind the men that we're relegating them to a lesser status. But again, it's nice to see a lot of military guys. You put what you want to protect behind you, not in front of you. And so a Muslim man wants to protect, I mean, this is going to sound very old school, he wants to protect his woman. So he's not going to put his woman behind, not because she's less, but because she's actually more important. Right? And so this is the idea. Also, the way we pray, foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder, men and women, if they were praying that way, especially young men and women, then they would, again, it affects the connection between their Creator, because now there's this natural connection that is being established by a young man and young woman praying next to each other. Now, when you go for the pilgrimage to Mecca, because there's so many people, you might actually be in a situation where a woman is praying next to you or in front of you, and that's fine in that circumstance. In terms of why were some women not praying, some of them may have chosen not to pray at this time out of reasons of modesty or whatever it is. Not saying that those who prayed are immodest or anything like that, but they wanted just to be, they want their own privacy in terms of bowing and prostrating. But also other women, the natural biological cycle that a woman goes through during that time, she's exempt from doing the prayers. It doesn't mean that she can't have a connection anymore. She can still, there are lesser types of formality in the prayer. She can still make supplication. She can still make remembrance. But this is a type of also license for her because of what she is going through at that time, that this makes it easier for her. Also, menstrual blood, we see it as an impurity as well. So I feel like I should have responded to that in writing instead of saying it out loud, but you guys do. So this is what's going on. All right. Yes.
There's two more. First, I was going to ask you, in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, it's a really more darker time of the whole religion. I was wondering, like, in the Quran, is there like a section kind of like that? Because I know Leviticus was about blood sacrifices and like, lambs and sheep and stuff like that. So is there something like that?
So in Islam, okay, yeah. So his question was that in the book of Leviticus in the Bible, it kind of gives connotation of a darkness of times and of sacrifices and difficulty, and then from the way the Christians are setting that up is to say that now Jesus, peace upon him, is coming and he's getting rid of all of that, and now it's a different. So in Islam, is there something similar? So I'll start with the sacrifices part. So we don't have an idea that an animal has to be sacrificed to remove our sins. But we do have animal sacrifice that commemorates when Abraham, peace upon him, was going to sacrifice his first son, but instead sacrificed a ram. And so that's a major festival for the Muslims where we continue to emulate that tradition. And then the meat, we eat from it and our family eats from it. And also we give to the poor and to those in need. For some people in the world, that's the only time that they eat red meat because it's given to them as a present. In terms of dark times, in a similar fashion that Christians talk about Jesus, peace upon him, and he is, as being this light for in a time of darkness. Prophet Muhammad is also talked about in a similar fashion. That the human beings at that time were steeped in superstitions, in ignorance, and then the Quran comes to the Prophet Muhammad, which is described as a book of light, and the Prophet Muhammad opens his mouth and the light comes and radiates and continues until today. So it wouldn't be a darkness in the religion, it would be a darkness in the human cultures and civilizations. And that even after the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, it would be in cycles. That the Muslims would be at cycles where they're down and then cycles when they're up and then down, etc. And the way to restore oneself is to keep on going back to the light, divine light.
How do you spell your name?
My first name is Islam, so Islam, in theme of March Madness. My friends used to say Islam, therefore I jam. And Mossad, we say in Arabic Mossad, it's M-O-S-S-A-D. Do you pray at very specific times, to a specific direction? Yeah, thank you for this question. I feel like I should give you $5 as part of the presentation. So we pray obviously we don't worship the sun, we worship the one who created the sun. But we use the sun to always know when the prayer time is. Nowadays, Muslims have, their iPhones or their Android phones, and they have apps. I mean, Muslims make so many apps for so many things. Maybe some of the Muslims in here have made apps. And so it gives you the time for each prayer. So how does it work with the sun? Basically at dawn, so you got to know your directions. So at the first light, so it's about an hour and a half before sunrise. Then when the sun reaches the highest point in the sky, then when it begins and it starts to decline, then when it declines even further, which is the late afternoon, and then at sunset, right after the sunset, which we just did, and then about an hour and a half after sunset. So that would be the specific times, specific direction. We call it a qibla, Qiblah. It's basically a compass heading. So this directionality is important. By the way, the Quran says, whichever way you face, there is the face of Allah. But in terms of a discipline and an order and a structure, kind of like when you have a lot of different atoms oriented in many different directions, then you get some sort of magnetic energy to line them up all in one particular direction. And so that would be the qibla for us, is where Abraham, peace upon him, and his first son Ishmael, they built a house of worship for the one God, which is in Mecca, right? And there in Mecca, in the center of the city, is the Kaaba, which is a cubical structure. Probably many of you have seen it, right? So y'all know Mecca. I did it's the name brand, so I said Mecca. And the Kaaba, like cube. And so each corner faces a compass heading. So one north, one south, west, and then east, right? And so that's the direction we face. So in College Station, Texas, it's roughly northeast. If you were in Hyderabad, India, or something like that, you would be facing west, right? Then I also teach high school students, so they get smart. Say, what if you're on the moon? Which way do you face? I just say, just face the earth, then. I don't know. So, when you get to the moon, ask me that question. So if so, what do you do when driving, working, eating? So when you are driving, you'll just stop in a rest area or a gas station. Every Muslim has their story and experience with that. So sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not. A lot of times, actually, what ends up happening is there are some idiotic, foolish type people who say certain things, Osama or watch out or something. But then also there's someone else there who's like, hey, just leave him alone. Let him, he's just doing his prayer or whatever it is. So you have both things going on. When you're working, also, when I was an engineer, just in my cubicle or a room that was drop I'd do my prayers there, no problem. But you have a window also. Some people think, oh, at that specific time, you just jump, drop everything, and right in the middle. You actually have a window. So you have, for example, from the early afternoon prayer up until the late afternoon prayer, you have that whole window to do your early afternoon prayer. So it's actually flexible. There are other ways to make it so that it can work. In terms of eating, etc. So the idea, and you saw how long it takes, and in less than 10 minutes, this is so important that we just stop everything, at least within that window, and we make that offering which is of devotion, of giving thanks, of connecting, and that is what sustains and brings blessing in the rest of our day or night on into the next life. So, all right.
We're out of time, unfortunately.
All right, so thank you all. Again, I conclude that all the glory is for Allah with the praise for Him. I testify that none is to be worshipped except for Him. I ask Him for forgiveness. I turn to Him in repentance. And thank you all. Wish you the best of success in your careers and in your education. And if you're ever in Austin, welcome as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We hope that it was beneficial. And if you all would please fill out your surveys if you didn't. And our last event will be answering the biggest question that we all have. What is the purpose of life? That will be by Yusha Evans, and that will be on April 10th at 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.